Hello, everyone. We are doing our presentation on LGBTQ cultural group, and my name is Amy Bradley.
My name is Jennifer Salgado.
My name is McKenna Hildebrand.
I'm Ashley Nemeth.
And I'm Christina Martinez.
So what is the LGBTQ plus? So these are the terms that are used to describe a person's sexual orientation. This could be abbreviated for lesbian. A lesbian means a woman enduring in physical romantic attraction to another woman. Gay means enduring attraction to the same sex. So it could be a male having an attraction to another male, but also it can be a woman having another attraction to another woman. So gay has the same meaning as lesbian, but gay can be perceived as males having attraction to the same sex, and lesbian for females. Bisexual is enduring attraction to one or more genders. So this means a man can have an attraction to both males and females, and females can have an attraction to both males and females. Transgender means one's gender identity at birth differs from the expression. So a man can feel that they want to be a woman, so they can undergo many surgeries of changing their body parts to become a woman. Same thing as for a woman, if they identify as a man, they want to undergo surgery so they can have male body parts as well. Queer is neither heterosexual or straight, so they don't identify with having an attraction of the same gender or of a different gender. And then additionally to the LGBTQ plus, the plus has people can identify as intersex, asexual, and non-binary. So the first use of these terms, so lesbian was first used in 1732 by William King's book called The Toast in England. As for homosexual, the first time it was used, it was in 1869 by Carl Maria Krinthi, which was a Hungarian journalist. Bisexual was first used in 1894 and used in the pamphlet Psychopathia Sexualis in German. Gay was actually first used in 1955, and it was used within Europe interchangeably, but they fully agreed on the same meaning of liking the same sex. As for transgender, the first time that word was used, it was in 1965 by John Olivan in his book called Sexual Hygiene and Pathology. So common misrepresentations within the LGBTQ community is that the assumption that all gay men are feminine. This has kind of roared around social media, especially that many people assume that if you identify as being gay, you have the characteristic of becoming similar to a feminine woman. But in reality, that's not true. It's the more people that believe that, it kind of feels true to this community, and it can be very offensive, or even it just doesn't identify of who they are as a person. Another representation is that the assumption that many lesbians with a short haircut are to appear more masculine. In reality, it's not true. That is not true at all. It's just many people believe or have a stereotype amongst lesbian women that the moment that they cut their hair short, they're already assumed that they're a lesbian. But a haircut's just a haircut. It doesn't define who you are as a person. It's just that's who you want to be represented as on the outside, but in reality, it doesn't define who you are on the inside. And another misrepresentation is that many companies assume the appeal to support LGBTQ community, but they will not hire the individuals. So this means that many companies will come out and have a whole branding of how they support LGBTQ community by saying that they support this community by doing the following, or they'll promote an item with has a rainbow flag on it to show that they support the pride. However, when you kind of look back deeper into the company, you can tell that many of the higher ups do not hire um, LGBTQ individuals because there's many companies that believe that they have certain stereotypes that are not true to the individuals. So there are many hate crimes against the LGBTQ community. The hate crimes have occurred since the colonial period. Way back in 1594, Theodore de Bride killed many same-sex indigenous individuals. This just shows that racism against and as well as many hate crimes have happened to this community for many years. With this hate crime targeting the same-sex individuals, but it also has targeted towards the indigenous people and people of color, proving that it has existed for over 200 years. Another hate crime was an incident called the Upstairs Lounge. So in the Upstairs Lounge, it happened in 1973, and this lounge was in New Orleans. And during this time, there was just a random fire within this lounge area. And this fire ended up killing 32 individuals who identified to be a part of the LGBTQ community, and at least 15 individuals were injured as well. Another incident that has happened that targeted the community was called Compton's Cafeteria. So in San Francisco, there was an area for where drag queens, transgender individuals, and gender non-conforming individuals, they've always been felt that they had to stay off the streets just by the way that people have treated them as not human beings, and they didn't believe that these types of people were an actual human. So this area in Compton's Cafeteria, this was an area for these individuals to feel welcome, and they are able to feel accepted into. However, during this time where many individuals felt that they were not being supported by many different communities, they felt there was many harassments being towards them. Many police officers arrested many individuals who are a part of this community just because they were gay. They just arrested them not for committing a crime. They just identified being gay or lesbian or transgender, and that was considered wrong. So these police officers just arrested them. One example that happened during this time, there was a trans woman that actually refused to be arrested from a police officer, and she started swinging at the police officer, and luckily her community was able to support her, and the whole entire LGBT community within that area ended up starting a riot against the police. And recently, a hate crime that happened just about like a few years ago was the Pulse nightclub incident. So back in 2016, there was a nightclub called Pulse that targeted the LGBT community. This was a very sad moment. There was an active shooter that came in and targeted this community within a nightclub, and it just so happened to be the largest attack in U.S. history. So the elimination of the hate crime, it has slowly evolved over the years, but it hasn't done this community or much justice. So back in 1871, there was an enforcement act. This was a first effort at federal level to criminalize hate crimes addressed anti-Black violence. So as we all know, that many African Americans have faced racism, and they always had many hate crimes against them. So this act was able to address the violence that these individuals had to face. Then there was a Supreme Court case called United States versus Harris in 1883. This act weakened the act and ability of the federal government to intervene with the states when the states had to refuse the prosecution of hate crimes. This Supreme Court case kind of separated the whole entire idea of the federal government supporting the states. So the federal government decided to go with have their own views of how having to deal with hate crimes with Black individuals. But the states decided that they didn't want to support the federal government, so they decided to prosecute hate crimes. Then in 1968, we had the Civil Rights Movement. Federal authorities to investigate and prosecute crimes by race, color, religion, and national origin. This was a major movement for a lot of individuals. However, it did not really help the LGBT community, but this was a large movement for individuals who have a different race of being white, and they have a different religion. It just doesn't involve discrimination against those people. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act. So this act ended segregation in public places and discriminated the race, color, religion, and national origin. Title IX Education Amendments Act of 1972. So this basically just prohibits sex-based discrimination. So this helped the LGBT community because during the time, many individuals who are a part of this community had faced a lot of discrimination based on their sexual orientation. And this act has helped this community by prohibiting it and not allowing any hate crimes or any discrimination based on a person's sexual orientation. Then recently in 2020, we had the Equality Act. So this Equality Act consisted of explicit anti-discrimination protections against LGBTQ individuals. So these individuals didn't have to receive discrimination in a workplace. They have the right to marry same-sex marriage, and this has helped the community a lot.
So I'm going to be covering the cultural traditions. So first of all, it's a very diverse culture because there's different religions, backgrounds, and races in it. So basically everyone is welcome despite their backgrounds. And the LGBTQ cultural history includes fights for marriage, joining the military, spousal inheritance rights and adoption rights, wonderful museums and libraries, clinics, youth programs, community centers, art exhibits, and even the pride parades. So there's a lot in their past that includes fights for basic human rights. And sadly, in the past, their culture has been hidden and not shared, as was previously brought up. There's a lot of shame or fear of harassment or even laws against the LGBTQ. So their ability to actually express their culture in public is relatively new. As for their cultural norms and values, there's intersectionality, diversity, inclusivity, alliance, and solidarity. So they stand together as one despite differences, and it's really important to them to be a unit. And some of the communities and groups that highlight this culture I've listed. So there's the American LGBTQ Museum, and there's several LGBTQ centers like spread around the US. There's also the National LGBTQ Task Force, and there's pride parades, with the one in New York being the biggest one. And then there's also Pride Month, which was just a couple months ago in June. And it celebrates LGBTQ rights and honors the Stonewall riots of 1969, which heavily fought for gay rights. And it also fights against discrimination and violence, not only from the past, but it continues today. And as for, oh, sorry, I had one more. For intercultural competence in the classroom, this is understanding, awareness, and acceptance of other cultures. So For LGBTQ cultures, it's important for teachers to understand that they may feel confused or not accepted. They may feel different because they're not a part of the social norm. So a teacher could offer them resources, like some of the communities that I listed above. There's also links at the bottom if anyone wanted more information or assistance on it. And these students need support because if it takes over their brain too much, it may even affect their schoolwork. So understanding their culture's past and letting them know that they're accepted in the classroom is vital.
So I'm gonna be covering the demographics, and there's a lot of information to go over, but we'll start with the LGBTQ adult population in the United States. And it's reached at least 20 million, according to the Human Rights Campaign Foundation report. You can see on the side we have like a graph that lists the percentages of US adults by age and the LGBTQ status. Um, and we also see that within California, there's approximately like 2.6 LGBTQ plus, and then in Texas, there's approximately 1.7. So these are like the two largest states that have the largest population of LGBTQ people in their communities. And these are the people who responded to the survey. So almost 1/3 of all LGBTQ students drop out of high school compared to nationwide average. And a lot of these students report dropping out of high school because they are harassed or bullied, they're made fun of, and that leads them to like dropping out because they're no longer comfortable in school, and they don't feel like they belong or they're not safe there at all. And that's from the American Sociological Association 2019. And then some other different demographics would definitely be the likelihood to experience homelessness. So there's two graphs on the side that are visible to you guys, and it just shows that students who identify as gay or lesbian or who are questioning their sexuality are more likely to experience homelessness than people who aren't part of the LGBTQ community. So nearly like 29% of students experiencing homelessness identify as either lesbian, gay, or they're questioning their identity, but they only make up 15% of the entire student population. However, transgender students are even more at risk because they are facing things such as like when they come out to their families and they try to transition, it's a much harder transition, and some people aren't always okay with it. That's why they often feel like unsafe in their own homes. So these students are 9.22 times more likely to experience homelessness than other classmates. And those are who are part of the LGBTQ community, adults that are incarcerated 3 times higher than the rate of the total population. And LGBTQ youth representation among incarcerated population is doubled their share. So that means like approximately like 124,000 adults that identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual are in US prisons and jails. So over 6,000 adults that self-identify as trans are in state and federal prisons. And then some other demographics, these go over like wages and how much people make, like based on ethnicity. So we see that the data shows that like 1 in 5 LGBTQ adults in the US, which is like 22%, live in poverty, compared to like 60% of the straight and cisgender counterparts. And then we see that LGBTQ people, like race and ethnicity, and people of color reported like lower wages and lower wage gaps relative to like the typical work person in the US. And the wage gap for Native Americans and Black LGBTQ members also was longer than seen for white LGBTQ workers. So their salary changes and the wages change. So you can see on the left side of the slide, we have like the numbers that were listed in the report. So like 97 cents for LGBTQ workers who are white workers earn every dollar the typical worker earns. So that means that like white people are making the same as a typical person who is like straight or cisgender, and then 90 cents are earned. So it goes down to like it goes down 7 cents for people who are part of the Latinx community and that are also part of the LGBTQ community. So they earn 90 cents every dollar for the typical worker earns, which is like a decrease from what a white worker would earn. And then 80 cents for Black workers in the LGBTQ community. They earn 80 cents for every dollar opposed to the typical worker. And some other things that we see are the salary data from almost like 7,000 LGBTQ full-time workers found that workers earn approximately 89 cents for every dollar earned in a week. Typically, the worker in the US earns more, and disparities were even more pronounced for LGBTQ women, transgender men, and people of color. So we see that the youth is also at 7,300, is double the share in the population of people who are in prisons and jails. I forgot to add that. That was part of the other slide, but that's pretty much it.
So I will be covering the classroom curriculum perspective. So as of March of 2021, the Committee on Education established the Assembly Bill 261, which is a law that passed in Nevada that requires public schools to establish standards of content and performance for certain courses study. It required the school district to teach curriculum of certain groups to students grades kinder through 12. The Assembly required Nevada's education agency to ensure the students are instructed on the history and contributions into the arts, humanities, and sciences of LGBTQ plus individuals. Getting into more resources a educator could use is on the website on Transgender Allies Group, also known as TAG. On their website, they provide a PowerPoint that defines transgender and information of the group. The PowerPoint basically describes the differences between gender, so biological sex, including intersex, and the gender identity as well as sexual orientation. It identifies basics for transition options for gender affirmation, as well the discrimination and microaggression against transgender people. It also includes the impact of stigma on mental health, those who identify in the LGBTQ plus community. So this could be used for educators during lessons as a great tool to present when introducing the topic about transgender or their gender identity. And it gives a synopsis of the different differentiations between the genders and the stigma that they receive. Another great resource that an educator could use is PFLAG, which they travel across the country to do assemblies and help schools be LGBTQ plus allies. In the year 2000, they created From Our House to the Schoolhouse, which is a campaign raised awareness about anti-LGBTQ plus bullying. In 2008, they created the Cultivating Respect Safe Schools for All, which helps transgender parents and allies advocate for anti-bullying. And they even started their own scholarship, which helps support LGBTQ plus graduating high school seniors. So in the classroom, as an educator, there are multiple ways that you can be an ally and you can help present the LGBTQ in your curriculum. So some ways are by drawing connections. So you can draw connections between what you're doing via like worksheets and your teaching. So for example, in a history class, you can connect the workshop to LGBTQ plus historical figures and the movements. Once you are involving the curriculum, you can invite administrators and other teachers into your lesson just so they can see what you are doing in the classroom. And it also helps other teachers see the purpose of your class. You could also define and clarify the terms you're using. So you may use certain languages that someone who identifies within the group may not use, or they may use. So you have to define your terms. If, for example, if you're using sexual orientation or gender identity, you have to make sure that everyone understands what you mean. If you decide to use words such as queer or dyke, you should also discuss what they mean to you and why you are choosing those words. You also have to keep in mind that not everybody will agree with you. We live in a society now that not everybody is going to be on the same page, and you have to be okay with that. You also have to remember when you are teaching these in a group of students, depending on the age range, older ones are a little bit more mature, and they will understand and grasp the information better rather than the little ones. So making sure that you know your reason behind what you're doing to help increase the awareness, and also being okay that people will disagree with you, as well as stick to your purpose. So you are there to help educate everybody, help educate the students, help educate anybody else who is in your workshop. So making sure that you're not teaching it as like a sex education class, but more as an awareness to help everybody understand the LGBTQ plus community. So some lessons that you can involve LGBTQ is in social studies. You have some famous lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people such as Alice Walker or Harvey Milk. They can be included in the civil rights, such as like this during the Stonewall riot in 1969 in New York City, or the election of Harvey Milk as the first openly gay politician. In language arts, you can have discussions or having picture books. If you have the younger kids, these books can lead to a great class discussions about families and about respecting differences and understanding the differences. You can have the students write about their own families, and they can go into more into depth of who lives in their household, and they can share amongst each other. Some book recommendations from ages 0 to 3 is Love Makes a Family, which shows that it doesn't matter what your family looks like. The only thing that a family makes a family. The ABC Pride ranges from ages 3 to 5, where they will learn the alphabet. So they'll learn A is for acceptance, K is for kindness, O is for out. The book Pride is for ages 5 to 8, which reaches the representation of the rainbow flag and the global symbol of equality and inclusion. The book The Misadventures of the Family Fletcher ranges from ages 8 to 10, which is about a family that's no different than the modern family. The family includes 4 adoptive brothers, has pets, and it has 2 gay dads in them. And then the book Pride, which is from ages 10 and up, which promotes historical figures that pushes equality. And this book reaches the readers into more in depth of how society has changed over the centuries. For music, arts, and PEs, you can encourage your children to have musical abilities. So being prepared for teachable moments, like having the students know that the color pink is not a girl's color, and choir isn't just for girls. It could be for everybody and anybody. You could also provide opportunities for both boys and girls to participate in all activities. Don't let comments like you throw like a girl or a boy is a sissy if he dances despite you from teaching these. And it also helps the students know that this certain object doesn't have to be for male or female.
So to move on to contributors, the first contributor is Barbara Giddings, and she organized a branch of Daughters of Bilitis, which was one of the first lesbian civil rights organizations in America. She helped to gather participants for public demonstrations even before the Stonewall riots of 1969, and she influenced the removal of homosexuality being considered a mental illness in 1973, and she helped to do this by forming a campaign to prove to the American Psychological Association that being gay was not a disorder. And she also worked with the Gay Task Force of the American Library Association for 16 years, promoting gay literature. And I think she's an important female figure because of her pioneering work. The next contributor is Marsha P. Johnson, and she was an activist for transgender rights and very influential during the Stonewall riots of 1969. And she was an active participant in marches for Pride, and also the co-founder of STAR, Sweet Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, in 1970. And that was a program to provide shelter to homeless LGBT youth. And I think she's an important figure to know about because of her contributions for propelling activism early on. The next contributor is Kasha Navigasara. She is a current activist, founder of Freedom in Rome, Uganda, an LGBT organization for women. She obtained the Human Rights Advocacy Diploma and has challenged anti-LGBT laws. She's one of the first lesbians in Uganda to speak publicly on LGBT rights issues through press statements and radio, and has earned the Martin Ennals Award for Human Rights Defenders. And though hostility continues, she still persists to make a change. And I think she's an important figure regarding our intercultural competence, because her work shows us that there is still so much work to be done around the globe for LGBT rights. The next contributor is also a present-day contributor. Cecilia Chung is an advocate for transgender rights and HIV/AIDS awareness. She led the San Francisco Human Rights Commission as the first transgender woman and was appointed to Presidential Advisory Council for HIV/AIDS awareness during Barack Obama's presidency, and founded Positively Trans in 2015 to share stories of trans people living with HIV. She was awarded the California State Assembly Woman of the Year award, and I think she's a good figure to know about because she's a local activist for us. The next contributor is Gavin Grimm, and he started his activism in his youth. So he is a transgender activist, and he was banned from using the boys' bathroom at school in Virginia in 2014 at his high school. And they initially told him that it was okay. So the American Civil Liberties Union held a case for him, and it nearly reached the Supreme Court, but it did go back down to the district courts, and the district court agreed that his rights were being violated under Title IX. But at that point, he had already graduated from high school. And he was named one of Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People in 2017. And for young students, I think he's a great figure to know about because he stood up against the injustice that he was facing in a school setting. And lastly, another youth contributor is Molly Pinta. And at 12 years old, she planned the first Pride Parade in Buffalo Grove, Illinois for 2019. And she raised money for the parade after attending one outside of her hometown. And she also founded the Gay Straight Alliance at her middle school and the Pinta Pride Project. Until this day, her parades still occur every Pride month. And Molly serves as a good reminder that it's never too early for us to become activists and fight for people's rights.
This is our LGBTQ plus infographic.